Welcome back to Vivid Noise. When it comes to racing games, my tastes don't veer too far off from the big names. You know, Need for Speed, Dirt, Mario Kart and its respective clones, and maybe an F1 game or the occasional simulator. Although despite the insane popularity it garnered during the 2000s, I never really got into the whole extreme sports variety of racing games. I think I played this Dave Mirra game when I was a kid, RIP, and I definitely played those dirt bike flash games that would go on to inspire the Trial series by Ubisoft, but up until recently I had never played any of Rainbow Studios' games like Motocross Madness, the MX series, or the first two ATV Off-Road Fury games. After playing all 4 console entries in the ATV series, half of which were done by Climax instead, I'd say I've gotten the most amount of enjoyment out of the second one, and now I want to talk about what makes it so fun and what this style of game has to offer over others. And just to get this out of the way, I didn't forget to up-res the game. PCSX2 just has some serious graphical bugs when running certain tracks at a higher resolution, so ultimately it's better this way. Plus, this game does support 480p as opposed to 480i, so it will look a little bit sharper than your average PS2 game. First, let's go over what this game has in common with Rainbow Studios' far more popular MX games. Although ATVs have 4 wheels instead of 2, a lot of the same principles still apply, at least as far as gameplay is concerned. You're going to be going over bumpy terrain, acceleration is near instantaneous, and you've got to do everything you can to not fall off. This means you're going to have to be aware of how you position and angle yourself when getting air, and especially when landing. And yes, you can even get knocked off or run over by your opponents, although the same goes for them, so you've got to play aggressively. Just like in any dirt bike game, you can even perform stunts in midair, although at least in the traditional championship modes, it doesn't seem to contribute to anything other than a high score. And easily the most significant similarity is the soundtrack. I'm serious, I don't think I've ever heard a list of licensed songs that fit so effortlessly into a video game before. The songs don't just feel like something that scores the action, but instead the experience feels hollow without them. Whether or not you like hip-hop and nu metal is irrelevant here. The dynamics and rhythms of this kind of music complement the constant ups and downs of the racing. It feels like every time I get air, the particular vocal cadence or guitar riff follows my ATV as I reach the apex of the jump and then head back down. It's almost scary how fitting it is. You really have to play the game yourself to get it, especially since I've replaced all of the music here because YouTube. Okay, now we can take a look at what makes the racing experience so addicting in this game. First, there's the handling model, which is one of those beautiful blends of arcadey abandon and carefully implemented realism. While the game lets you drive pretty recklessly, there's still a line that you have to make sure you don't cross if you want to be able to keep up. Take for example the turning radius. It's a hell of a lot smaller than anything else on 4 wheels, so you're encouraged to take the shortest possible lines on every corner. But that doesn't mean you can just launch yourself full speed at every turn with no regard for your entry. There's still the element of inertia, and underestimating the weight your ATV carries will make you lose places. The trade-off is that with the right timing, you could potentially overtake the entire pack in one fell swoop. And the subtle benefit to the fact that you're not glued to your quad is an incentive to drive clean. Far too often, I find myself using my opponents as my brakes instead of actually trying to slow down the appropriate amount, especially if the game in question is lenient on the damage modeling. If you tried that here, you're just going to end up on the ground, although it does feel pretty good when you pull a burnout and manage to take someone out via the physics engine. There's also the track design, which after completing several championships, I can safely say is a perfect fit for the driving model. The courses strike that balance between being approachable with no prior practice, helped by the fast response time on your ATV's turning, and also being infinitely rewarding to memorize. Since you spend a fair amount of your races in the air, sometimes you're going to have to angle yourself so that you flow smoothly into the next corner before it's even in view. There's never a time when you absolutely have to do this, but the time you lose readjusting yourself last minute definitely doesn't go unnoticed by the AI. And speaking of, this is one of those 2000s arcade racers that doesn't employ any rubber banding. As you would expect, this means that races can vary in terms of how the pack gets spread across the track. Sometimes it can be super close, and other times you're fighting just to hold on to that podium finish, and you can completely forget about first or second. This doesn't mean that ATV Off-Road Fury 2 is brutally punishing or anything. I've had championships where I've only finished first about once or twice, and still ended up with a gold trophy. All the lack of rubber banding really does to the racing is make everything feel like it's in your hands. I believe rubber banding has its place in the racing game world, but seeing it absent in what is otherwise a fairly over-the-top game is quite a nice change, and it makes the tight races all the more exciting because you know that there's no strings being pulled. Getting back to the track design, there's a certain subtlety to how you approach each track section that really drives home the difference between this and a standard racing game. If you've played anything by Criterion during the late 2000s and early 10s, you're probably already accustomed to your vehicles going off jumps. And with the way something like Burnout Paradise or Most Wanted 2012 are designed, you're going to want to be going as fast as possible before you take flight. But much like in Trials or any number of physics-driven dirt bike games, doing this in Off-Road Fury 2, or any game in the series for that matter, isn't always optimal. Sometimes going a little slower will allow you to be faster in the long run. There's two main reasons for that. First of all, being in the air means you can't steer, which means that you won't be able to position yourself properly for any corners coming up or an even bigger jump. And then there's the matter of preserving your momentum. There is nothing that kills your speed faster in this game than landing a jump at an awkward angle or weird spot on the following ramp. How you adjust your entry speed before a jump and the force with which you thrust yourself forward with the left analog stick can be the deciding factor in a lot of races. This system is that extra 10% that makes this game as enjoyable as it is for me. Going from a conventional on-track or street racing game to this really is a lot more than a matter of just getting used to the tighter handling. You have to start thinking about your vehicle's weight differently and how it responds to the diverse terrain. Even just a straight section of track requires hundreds of little micro adjustments to maximize your speed. And especially when it comes to dealing with jumps, you have to commit fully to the angle and height, since once your wheels leave the dirt, you're left to the mercy of the physics engine. And now with all of that said, this is the kind of gameplay I define as timeless. It's approachable yet uncompromising, simple yet nuanced, and has enough systems at play that every time you pop it in, you're in for something a little bit different. There's always that slight element of unpredictability, but you never feel like winning is down to chance. And thanks to how the music complements the gameplay so seamlessly, not even the nu metal, which is what would typically date a game from this time period, stands out as a product of its time. And with that, thanks for listening to me gush over a nearly 22-year-old off-road racing game that was ultimately overshadowed by its creator's future outings. And as always, thanks for watching another episode of Vivid Noise, and I'll see you guys next time.